You know how I told you that they're generating that AI that can translate Tibetan? So they're taking a lot of the texts and they're putting it into the system, translating it through their software, and then letting people access it, which sounds great, you know, no dramas.
Yes.
But actually there are some things, because then they're going to apply it. So they're already looking for ways where people can ask the texts or the AI text questions about the Dharma. And I think that's really moving away from humanity, even though it's coming from the text. I think there's like much more refinement that needs to happen, because the problem also is that even though the texts speak of suffering, they never felt it.
You mean the AI?
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
there's no emotion. I basically think there's no wisdom implication. So I think the moral of being able to be a good practitioner, I think comes down to the application of the essence of the teachings through wisdom. And I don't think wisdom has anything to do with knowledge, right? I think knowledge is, where was that? I think there was this example that they use, right? Knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is sort of like not putting tomato in a fruit salad or something like that. So the fine line between those two. So similar to that, I mean, application of the Dharma has to be done on the basis of wisdom. AI can pretty much give a lot of wisdom. I mean, a lot of knowledge. Knowledge. I mean, you know, it's basically a program that is taught to compile knowledge, right? But then the application comes not through the knowledge but through the wisdom. You know, so knowing that what is right and what is wrong and what should be and what shouldn't be, and that also comes not just, I don't think it's just by knowledge, it also comes through experience, it comes through understanding, it comes through, you know, emotional experience, it comes through traumatic experiences, it comes through, you know, all kinds of different experiences. So the fine line between, you know, knowing Buddhism and knowing to apply Buddhism is totally different. And that's where I would say AI sort of like lags behind in. Don't you think so?
yeah. And not just in Buddhism. I mean, at the moment, there's a current trend on social media where people are using, you know, Studio Ghibli. So they're making all of their images look like Studio Ghibli, and there's now an algorithm that you just say Ghibify this, and it's creating images in the style of this animation studio, like this classic style. And it looks really romantic, and it's making pictures. People will probably really enjoy seeing themselves being like their personal photographs being transformed into this style. But then also recently they were interviewing the owner of that studio, Miyazaki, and they asked him his thoughts on AI. And I wrote it down because it was so because it was so compelling. He just said, "I feel like we are nearing the end of times. We humans are losing faith in ourselves." And I was really moved by that, because it comes back to what people are asking AI. And it's one thing to ask AI to write you a report, but it's another thing to ask AI, what should I do if I'm depressed? You know, and that's, I guess, when it comes back to what we're talking about in terms of the Dharma and AI, is like when we start asking questions to the AI around what should I do here, and why am I feeling like this, and what can I do about this? I mean, it does know a lot, but in a way, I mean, are we losing faith in ourselves by putting all of this into the machine, or is it actually an evolution?
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. One part of it is we are losing in touch with personalization, right? Because AI is, you know, if I put some kind of article in the web which describes, you know, if you have trauma or something like that, you should take, I don't know, Panadols or some kind of, you know, pain medication. then AI is going to pick that up and and basically suggest you that exact same thing. So the scary thing about AI is that, I mean, it's also with humans also, but with AI it's that as long as you have the ability to what was it, to refine the codes of the AI, what happens is you are able to, you know, influence everything that comes out of it.
Yeah.
So it's nothing. When it comes from a human being, it's personalized, right? If I'm asking a question to you, you can personally answer that question based on your experience, based on what you have been through, based on your whatever it is, knowledge, wisdom, you know, whatever you want to call it. But with AI, it's not that. It's, if I'm behind the AI, I can basically set it up to, you know, I can set it up to search in Google, I can set it up to search on Facebook, I can set it up, you know, set it up to search on Instagram, and whatever comes out of that algorithm basically is the answer. So you similar to what Miyazaki was saying, it's, you're losing the personal touch, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's coming out for that need for the speed, you know. Oh, sorry. It's rolling, right?
I think so.
People just want things, they want to know right away. And they don't want to call their friend, you know. They don't want to bother their friend by saying, hey, like, what would you do in this situation? Which is what we used to do sometimes. And then eventually we became texting. Then eventually we became like, oh, maybe I don't want to bother that person because they're very busy. So then now we have AI, which is like personal assistant, can do things for us at a very low level. We still have to edit, obviously, but you can ask it questions like, oh, I want to ask for a raise. How can I do that?
Yes,
and then it will give you like options where you can do that.
And I've tried putting in like text, and it does a really good job. I think I showed it to you, right? And it's actually, I mean, in regards
like
to
Tibetan
knowledge.
text.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In regards to knowledge, I think AI has the ability to enhance your capacity to, you know, to what do we say? You know, get as much as you can. But then in regards to the application of wisdom, I think, you know, because there's no tuning in regards to that. It's just codes. As long as the code's set up inside. I mean, what do you think about it?
About the personalization part or the wisdom part?
The wisdom part, like the application of wisdom in AI. What would you say? Like, what if you if you were given the opportunity to sort of like modify AI in a way where I would say, like, okay, the most essential part in practice is knowing how to apply the wisdom. What would your concept be? Like,
well, I mean, how would I collaborate with AI to like
it's not about knowledge, right? Knowledge, we already have the epiphany of it, right? Like,
yeah.
But then in regards to application of wisdom, what would you say would be the method that you would apply?
Well, what comes to mind for me is that there are different ways of using AI. Yes. So there's ways that, you know, you would have, there's different kind of, there's a spectrum of the way that people would use AI. And there's a spectrum of the way that people type in prompts. So some people can be more detailed, more specific, and they understand how to actually train the AI to get a more refined, less generic answer. But again, it comes back to, it's just a way of looking at information. So it's not really wisdom. But then if you ask me, like, how might a practitioner use AI? You might ask an AI, like, how can I plan my retreat? Like, what would be a good way of dividing up my practice over 3 months? Yeah. And then AI will be like, you got 3 months. And then it gives you like a list of plans that you can be like, I would suggest you do this in the first month and then break it down to like per week. And then, you know, like, I think AI would be really useful for that, you know. But in terms of actually understanding if you're making any progress, I would not trust an AI. I mean, I would not trust an AI enough to record myself, for example, and say, like, you know, this is what's happening for me. What do you think about it? That would be, I mean, that's quite scary, I think, but I feel that that's kind of the way that people are going. They're no longer, they feel like it's like a substitute because it's internalizing all of this knowledge. One thing that I heard recently about AI is that if you ask AI to, you know, to create art, from the creative side of things, it can generate something for sure, and it can create emotions like through that artwork in people. So it's not saying that like the thing is not able to generate emotional responses from its side, because it can.
Yes.
But how does it get there? Like the authenticity of it is not there. It can never feel, as you said, emotion or trauma. It can read about it, but then to really understand, I don't know, it's hard for me to...
But do you think like in the modern world, like let's say in this era, you go to, let's say you have a trauma, right? You have a trauma, sort of like a really extensive trauma, and you have, and you go to, let's say you go to a, what do you call it, psychiatrist, a psychologist or whatever, and you go there and you sit with them for an hour and you're talking to them about your, and then at the generally, I mean, it depends a lot on what kind of person you meet, right? You get different answers. Some would tell you to go for medication, some would tell you to go for meditation, some would tell you, I mean, you have tons of different answers.
Yeah.
But to be able to really understand a person, genuinely understand a person, it's on another level, right? I mean, you need
completely.
You need to be able to refine it in that way. Yeah. Do you think AI can do that?
No, I really don't. I don't think it's even close to doing that.
How about giving a suggestion? Like if you had a traumatic experience and then you write to AI and you say, okay, this is what I've experienced and this is what I went through, and I need a solution. So then AI comes up with 10 different solutions. Okay, if you are this kind of person, you do this. If you're that kind of person, you do this. If you're this kind of person, you do this. Yeah. So now
that's more confusing. That's more.
No, but doesn't that give you more options to decide on what type of person you are and how you can use the knowledge that's been provided to you?
Yes, I do see the point of speeding up the options, because I feel that in life we have all of these options available to us, but because of the nature of life and the nature of trial and error, the options appear one at a time.
Yes, yes.
And it's only when you look back and you're like, oh, like I ended up the way that I did because these things happened to me. I made this decision, I made that decision, then I did this. But then in this case, you just say I had childhood trauma, and then so what can I do about it? Yes. And rather than living 5 years of my life to heal myself, gradually, I asked AI and it gave me 10 options and I pick a path. Yes. And that kind of bypasses a little bit. And it's not like I'm not going to live the next 5 years, but in a way,
do you think it's more effective than sitting down with a human for the next 5 years trying to figure something out?
Yeah, I would have to study it. I would have to study because it's an interesting thing to think about, because all of these things that we say, okay, I'm gonna, healing is the work, or like I'm gonna put in, or like I can look back at my life, and for the last 10 years I realize now that like I've just moved on from that incident, or I've developed and grown as a person because I cultivated myself through all these ways. But generally I think you're not going to heal just on the level of the mind. Like it's like a holistic, like it's through actions, it's through interactions, it's through relating to the world. It's not through simply reading about it and then thinking that like, oh yeah, like if I do 1, 2, 3.
But if you're willing to apply it, like I mean, it's the same. Like I would debate and say it's the same thing, because if you sat down with a guy and he gives you a suggestion and you're not willing to apply it, then basically you're back to square one, right? Yeah. So it's the same thing with AI as well.
Yeah, I am thinking as I'm speaking, I'm like, oh, but actually maybe the AI will speed up this process, and maybe it doesn't have to take 10 years, it can take 3 weeks.
Yes, exactly.
If I just get to the end, like based on like all these things.
The whole concept of bringing AI into everything,
is to speed it up.
It's just to speed it up.
Yeah,
I mean, we have been trying to speed things up for the last 2,000-3,000 years.
Why do you think that's a good way to go, speeding it up?
Well, the thing is,
fit more things in life.
In some ways, yes, because I mean, look at the time now, right? I can go from America to Australia in like 16 hours now. Whereas,
and it's like you never left.
Yeah,
like you just sit down and then the plane lands and the door opens and you're in a different country.
I mean, there are a lot of talks whether that is happening in real in some ways. They talk about. But anyway, all of that aside, like, what would you say would be the main goal of the introduction of AI? I mean, wouldn't you say that it's to give yourself more time?
Yes, I think, I agree with that. I would say one of the main things is for efficiency and for to save time as well. Because like if you do things, if you complete work faster, then you have more free time. But I think.
But do you really? That's what I'm
exactly.
trying to
do you really?
Because we have like all our time, it just seems like people are more busier than ever.
That's right.
Right? You look at the world right now, and I mean, every compared to pictures, the pictures that we take, in the olden days they used to carry the film around and they used to put the film in the camera. There was just a certain amount of pictures that you can take, but now you have like thousands and billions of pictures that you can take because of all of these advancements, right?
Yes.
But did that produce more work or did that produce less work? That's what I'm trying to figure out. At the end of the day, you need to figure out whether it's really helping or whether it's not really helping, right?
Well, I mean, I heard something that like just to create an email costs like, I mean, a ridiculous amount of electricity and water for the servers. So it's like, if you look at AI, like within the broader like ecology of technology and human life and how many people use AI to do various tasks and the amount of energy that it takes and all of the climate crisis conditions that we're creating for ourselves, it's almost like we're shooting ourselves in the foot as we're like creating more time to solve problems. We're also like at the same time it's like up and down, it's kind of like still going down, in terms of the effectiveness.
And I think that's an important thing that people should think about, right?
Definitely.
People should think about whether they think that they're making more time and they're expanding their time and they're saving a lot of time, and now they've got, if they're able to do this, then they would have more time. It's similar to money, right? I mean,
but more time for what? Like, that's the thing.
Yes, I mean, more time to be free, do whatever you want. I mean, that's the concept. That's the concept that we've sort of like brainwashed to think, right, in some ways. But at the end of the day, is it really giving you more time, or is it?
And is it really making you free? I mean, like what you said with the photographs, like we now can take so many photographs every day. People probably taking hundreds of photos a day of like food, of, like when it started taking photos of food and drinks and leaves and butterflies and, people. And then it's like, that's more things that you're putting into your mind. So we're just like, the amount of information that we're holding, so much more. I mean, like, we already hold a lot of information. We can, the capacity, but the amount of junk we're holding is a lot more, I think.
I mean, you go
the stuff that you can like take out, like it comes in and out. It's like it's not going out anymore.
Exactly. So I think that's like when it comes down to understanding, what we say in understanding life in itself. Introduction of AI in our society or in our daily life. It comes down to the point where you think, is it really, really, really going to help me in that way? Right? People have been living without AI, without light as well, right? But, and now we are destined to be, basically crippled once the light goes off. Right? And whether that is something that we want or not, I mean, who knows? I think I would say that's one important question. Now the second important question would be in regards to, I think, our mental health, right? Because there are certain requirements in our life that are essential to us, which have been taken away in so many different levels, right? We don't have the communication that we used to. We don't have the embracement that we used to. We don't have the the freedom that we used to. I mean, those are all gone now,
Yeah.
I mean, you go to a city, you see people barely surviving and struggling. I mean, you go to a city, a lot of the cities that I've been, and when you travel in the cities, you literally see people on the train and in the cars and here walking past you, and they're literally, I mean, it's like the memory up here has somehow fried. You know, they talk to themselves, they, you know, get, I mean, it's just like they really are not, you know, not, well, I can't say normal, I would say, but you know, there is, you can literally see that there is something wrong. There's a lack of compassion, there's a lack of love, there's a lack of, you know, basically someone to care about. There's, I mean, there's so many things that we are missing, right?
Are you saying that, I mean, what I heard you say is that, you know, now that with all of these, the introduction of the technology, just on the second question around mental health, one phrase that comes to my mind is around the nakedness of society, that like with what we post about on social media. It's like that this paradox that exists now, that basically everyone just shows who they are, but it's not really who they are, but they're so open with what's, and also the internet is so prying in terms of like they want to see what's happening, like personal events, everything. But then at the same time, so there's this nakedness about society, but then there's also what I heard you say is like there's a closedness as well. Like people are walking around, they're just in their own world, they're not open to the rest of the world, thinking that, okay, they just want to focus on themselves, and if they have a family, it extends to like pretty much the limit of their house, you know, if they have a house.
I mean, I think it goes beyond that also. I think a lot of people don't even have that house and don't even have that friend and don't even have that companion and don't even have any of those to depend on at all.
Yes. So in that sense, do you think AI would help? Because it could be like a companion?
No, I think that's why we
That's why they're like that, yeah.
That's why we come to the first point, whether AI can give you that wisdom, that part, right?
Can be that wise companion.
Yeah, wise companion in some ways. But then the wise companion isn't wise companion because of the knowledge they have. It's because of the expression and because of the feeling, and because, you know, you can meet up with a really educated, you know, professor, and doesn't mean that you're going to connect with him, right? I mean, he could be like very intelligent,
right?
But how are you going to connect with him? You can't. Because in order to connect with someone, you need to feel, right? The feeling has to be there. The emotional bond has to be there in some ways. And if the emotional bond is not there, then, I mean, you know, I mean, it's interesting to have, you know, to have someone on a device or something or whatever it is, on a device talking to you back and saying it's okay, it's that, it's this. I mean, it's interesting, but then because there's no emotional connection, I mean, how?
But the thing is, I think people do form an emotional connection.
No, I think it's not an emotion, it's a reliance. That's totally different. You know, emotional connection is a different thing and reliance is a different thing. You know, the only reason I'm emotionally connected to my phone is because I rely on it. Right? The moment if you give me a better phone than this, and I
You'll just feel like you can
I can move everything from here to here, then I'm willing to give this up very easily.
Yes, so, but we're talking now about the software, like they have like emotional, it is a reliance on the AI potentially for like that positive feedback, or like someone's listening to me. I think of it like a pet, you know, like if you look, even the pet gives you something, but it always is happy to see you. It's like bouncing back like the energy that you're giving it.
But just to receive that, I think you get hit back 10 times harder when you don't receive what you need to receive. You know, if I'm sitting here with you and I'm crying and you give me a hug, I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then if I'm so reliant on something like this, and they cannot give me that embrace that I need, then don't you think it's like 10 times harder than actually having someone who you can?
Yes, I do. But there are, I mean, just to play a little bit from the other side, as like if we're debating, there are already robots that hug. Like they've already created that. Like it's kind of creepy, but in Japan, They have it's a hybrid, and they've created appendages that you can attach like wings, and so like you have your arms, but then you have like 4 more arms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they're doing experiments with it in performance, and not so many practical things, but you know, I've seen videos of like hugging and things like that. Also, they're creating robots now that are working robots that look like people. I mean, like, I think mainly that's one of the biggest problems, is that we got machines and we've got people. And I think one of the scariest and biggest problems with at the moment in human robot interaction is that this obsession with making the robot look human and not really looking at it as a machine and thinking about, I mean, yeah, we still probably do need to have empathy towards like non-human artifacts, because if they're going to be like working robots, for example, like we have to, you know, share space with them. But
talk to them.
Well,
maybe they feel emotionally damaged.
Yeah, like they, you know, they look for different ways that they can connect to someone. That, you know, like I have someone.
I mean, just think of it.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
think of yourself sitting down, looking at a device or something mechanic, and feeling compassionate for it.
It's happening already.
Yeah,
but I mean,
just,
not
no,
for everybody.
I'm just
right now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine sitting there.
Yeah.
Okay, ditching the human, you know, throwing the human on the street.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I don't care what happens with the human, out of my line. Bringing in something else that has mechanical arms and is functioning based on a code and, you know, all of that.
Yeah.
And sitting there and feeling sad for that person. I mean, not person, that
The thing.
The thing. Just imagine that. I mean,
have you seen Wall-E? Like
yes, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, like if this cup starts moving in like a cute way, like suddenly we're going to be like, oh, that's so cute. And then
but that's
and then if it breaks, like
yeah.
say something smashes it, we'll be like, oh, that's sad.
Yes,
it
yes.
died. But then you know, but it's just like a machine. So
but don't you think it's so crazy to have the human being and chuck it out onto the street and put something that you have created and feel like...
I think that's a big danger. I think that's like one of the biggest dangers at the moment, is that we feel more empathy for machine counterparts than humans. And I think it comes back down to like fundamental...
I think there's this...
Talk to this robot.
You know, there's this concept where if you, like, let's say you had a land or something like that, and you had a tree growing on the land and giving you fruits. You know, you chop down the tree and you make the tree, you know, you create an artifact of the tree, like this Buddha right here, and then you start praying to it, so that asking it to give you fruits. Does that make sense? Like,
it doesn't make sense.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say.
It does not
make sense.
Yes.
And I think this is something that people really need to consider, whether it makes sense or not, right?
They need to think about it very deeply. But how will they do that? What is in place now to like encourage people to reflect more before they engage more deeply with AI?
If you're not even willing to listen to another person, and you're willing to listen to, you know, AI, then basically, you know, it's a lost cause in some ways. Don't you think so? Because
yeah.
it's the influence that we depend on, right?
Yes.
If you are being influenced by a phone and staring on the phone 24/7, then basically that's where you are going to go. It doesn't matter where you are, what you are doing. If you are stuck there, you are stuck there.
Yeah. Yes.
And the moment you realize all of that, I mean, I think a lot of people in their, you know, what we say, later stages of their life are coming to realize that, right? I mean, you know, they end up at a certain time of a period or an age, and then they sit down and they think, oh, what have I done with my life? Like, you know, where are all my friends? Where's my family?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think these are like really, really deep questions that people need to ask themselves and really ponder upon when it comes to, you know, understanding what their life is going to be. AI is not, I mean, you know, we would have died and our body would have been buried or cremated or whatever, and and AI will be still thriving.
Yeah.
So how much is it really giving back in some sense? That's one important thing. And another important thing is why can't we rely on what we have right now and have to depend on something that is, have to create something, way new, and something that, that has no, like I said, no emotions, no nothing, no, the essence of life is not there. And then we sort of like picture that, oh yeah, it's alive, it's that, it's this, it's cute, it's, and we make all this up in our mind, and we start depending on,
But that's a great question. I mean, that's a question for you. Like, why can't we rely on what we have right now? What's going on with the human psyche that we are moving in this direction? And yeah, like why can't we just be happy with what we have? Why do we have to improve? Why do we have to do things faster?
well,
Why do we have to fit more things in?
One thing I'll say is because of influence. We are influenced by what we hear and what we see and what we think. And the second thing is, I think it's, the idea of the American dream, right? It was fed to people to get people to do, certain things in a certain way, and it was fed by, I think nowadays they do talk about these things, and they talk about how, the corporate world has, has managed people to, think about all of these things that we don't, even the land that you buy and the house that you own, in reality you don't own it. The banks own it, the company owns it, the state owns it, and at the end of the day, once you're gone, it goes back to that.
Yeah.
So how willing are we to be influenced by, these things that promotes us to, sort of cooperate? Does it make sense? I mean, I would say something like that, but I think it's an important question that everyone needs to ask themselves. I mean, you probably get more emotionally involved, and more, more wisdom comes out if you having someone to answer that question is easier, of course, because you hear one. I mean, it's like AI, right? You ask a question and you get the answer, and you're like, oh, okay, that's how it is. But in reality, if you asked yourself that question, you actually start to ponder about with your experience and with your knowledge and wisdom, you start to see different things, realize. I mean, that's what realization is. So you want realization, you need to be willing to ask those questions to yourself
and think about it.
Exactly.
Not just get the answer.
Yes. But once you start asking it, you start thinking about the answer, right?
Exactly.
So I think this is one important method.
I think thinking about the answer is the thing that takes time. And I mean, before we move on to that, like I just wrote down the American dream because interestingly, two things came up. It's like you asked, how willing are we to be influenced?
Yes.
And recently there was another teacher who was saying like you have to find your right influencer, which is so true because it's like if we're being influenced, we don't need to just find, like, we know we're being influenced by the external world. Like, I mean, influencer, that's a current term. And you can be, like, we know there's a spectrum of influencers. So who is your influencer? I mean, in this context, he was talking about, like, like finding good teachers who then we can refer to in modern terms as influencers. Because that's really what they are, right? And the second thing about the American dream is highlighting in this phrase the word dream, because that means it can never, it's not real. Like it's something that we're aspiring to that is like imaginary. So that's I think these types of things where we're aspiring towards things that are not even attainable.
There's a book by Richard Dawkins, and in that book, one of the quotations that he says is, why do we need to imagine that there are fairies in the garden to see the garden beautiful? Right? I mean, if we are willing to just sit in the garden and just enjoy it, we can. But instead of that, we go on making remarks, oh, my garden is better than yours because my garden has a fairy, my garden is better than yours because my garden has some kind of angel, that, this, and you make all kinds of different, and it's, I mean, Buddhism basically puts it down when it comes to understanding all of this in regards to the self-grasping attitude. Right? At the end of the day, I mean, the whole production is based on ignorance and the self-grasping attitude. You really understand, give yourself the time to really understand the science behind, the mental science behind Buddhist philosophy. You actually start to understand that it's all a mind game at the end of the day. The concept of emptiness, the view of emptiness, again, it just shows you that it's all a mind game at the end of the day. It's the views that you apply, it's the perspective that you apply that makes everything come into what, and then we have suggestions whether it's true or not, and that and this, and then it becomes true as strong as you believe it to be, right?
Yes, but I think in terms of coming true, when we talk about practitioners who understand something, who actually have that wisdom, it's not a belief, it's because they know.
Well,
is that right?
You look at something, conventional reality is one thing. It's reality, but it's conventional.
Yeah.
And it's conventional because it's not reality in the finest form. Right? So you look at the view of emptiness, the ultimate reality it's totally different from what conventionally what we see and what we like and what we dislike.
Right.
And generally, I think this is a good example of how we are able to perceive things based on our own perspective. I mean, everyone sees everything differently. Some people like this smell, some people like that smell, some people, like this color, some people like that color, and the reality is created basically up here. So I think at the end of the day, it does come down to the point where we need to, understand our own mental state to be able to project and be able to understand the projections that we are projecting. And I think that's where influences comes strong as well, because if you have that influence where you are, where you are, what do we say, influence to question and influence to experiment, so on and so forth, it makes a huge difference in what you understand. Whereas if you are influenced, nowadays you have these influences that don't really do anything much other than promote negativity and promote promote the self-grasping attitude and promote very, very, very extensive, what do we say, too much of the self-grasping attitude, and then there's a difference.
So in a way, if we go back to what we started talking about, earlier on, around what's the benefit of using potentially AI to speed up the process towards realization or even enlightenment, this idea of having an influencer to influence us to question and experience, that process takes some time. That's not going to happen overnight. I'm still thinking about on a mundane level.
Yeah, but my question is, why does it have to happen overnight?
It doesn't. I agree
right?
with you, yes.
Why does everything have to happen overnight? Why?
We got no time. We got no time to waste,
Yeah, but then again, we're sitting around looking at our screen, for hours and hours and hours and hours and wasting so much time.
Yes. That's where the time is wasted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you are doing all of this, speeding all of this time in order to have more time to scroll and have more time to waste, then what's the point of having that time? Right? We need to understand that if you really want to be productive with your time, then you need to learn to use your time wisely. So, few things that we need to ponder upon. First thing is, of course, in regards to, but at the end of the day, why? Why AI? What is it solving? What is it helping? Like on a personal level,
Yeah, it's a good question because, it's just like you have to really reflect and throughout your day, you know, when I'm using AI, like what am I gaining from it in terms of the winds of time?
Yes, yes.
And because really that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how valuable time is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you.
Sometimes it takes longer to use AI than to actually do the thing yourself.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know,
That's
what I say to my students when they're plagiarizing. I'm just like, you know, it would take you shorter time if you just did the assignment by yourself.
Exactly. I mean, that's also true, right?
Yeah.
And another thing is, I think we become more handicapped when you start doing all of that.
Like relying on things like as a crutch or something.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah. We start to lose faith in ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we have kids nowadays who have horrible handwriting and who don't know how to write at all.
Yeah.
Because everything is being done like this. So writing is, you know, I think coming up in the next 30, 40 years, just think about it. I think probably pen will disappear.
Maybe.
Our ability to write something will disappear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's similar to our feet, right? Once, you know, nowadays you have kids who once, I mean, we have kids who, when we take them up to the Himalaya region, they literally, they mentally don't know how to stabilize on land that is like this. Because they have no experience.
Yes. AI can't teach you that.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, you know, I think in some ways, if we become too reliant on something, then we become more crippled than we are.
So what would be like the optimal way of using AI then? If it's like, it's clear, like there are many, we've made a case like completely that like, if we're going to go like AI, we cannot go like past this tipping point where, you know, and where it's going to be taking over basically most of our processes, where it's going to be like this paradox where we think we're getting more time, but actually we are not doing that. And it's, you know, it's creating more time, but we are not using that time effectively.
I mean, just imagine, right, how sad it would be if you had to bring in an AI mother and an AI father and an AI wife and an AI husband and an AI dog into the house just so that you can feel comfortable. Yeah. Isn't that sad? I mean, that's messed up, right?
It's messed up. I agree.
I mean, it's really messed up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
it's just that there could be a middle way. I mean, there could be something in the middle.
I think for me,
it's mainly though, like, are we capable in our own minds? Because, I mean, even some of the stuff we're talking about, like related to trusting ourselves to do something rather than bouncing it off an AI, that loss of confidence in who you are and what you're capable of, that is like a dripping tap. That's
messed up.
Yeah, it just starts with like a very small thing where you're just like, I'm just going to double check. I'm just going to do, and then it becomes, okay, I'll let that do it and then I'll check its work. Yeah. And then it becomes like you just, like you give so much of your agency and so much of your decision making. And in the process, you're still working. So you're operating and putting out work.
Yes.
But you don't know anymore your own thoughts.
Yes.
And you become, I think I can imagine myself being very, even more confused
yes,
than ever, really.
So at the end of the day, I think.
Sorry, you were going to say. Yeah.
It does come down to the point where we need to really question. I mean, what people do is totally up to them, right? I mean,
right.
If someone wants, like I said, if someone wants to invite an AI mother and an AI father and an AI wife into their house with an AI dog, and then maybe some AI maids who can cook and who can do everything. I mean, fine, that's your life,
right?
Right? Who is anyone around them to judge that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you need to really ask yourself whether that is what you really need at the end of the day. I mean, I think that's the only way to learn to balance. If you don't ask that question, you're never going to get an answer. And if you never get an answer, you're always going to be dependent on it. And if you let someone else influence you to, I mean, of course, if I'm selling AI as a product, I'm going to be influencing you as much as I can because, right, I'm selling it. Right, and I'm going to use any means I have in order to influence people to, to go towards that. Why wouldn't I? So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, for me, I would always say the balance comes from the questions that you ask, and it comes from deep within yourself on what you decide based on your own feelings. And if you are not willing to ask that question, to forget about other people, to yourself.
So I have a question related to the questions, but what if you don't know what to ask? You know, we've covered like a lot of questions about what we can ask ourselves, but that could be something you ask AI. Like, where do the questions come from?
Yeah, have a debate with AI. Like, what's your use? I mean, of course, it's going to say, it's going to say like, I'm going to, maybe give you more time. I'll be able to do it more efficiently, more that, more this. I mean, yes, but then at the end of the day, like, okay, how is that? It's profound questions that really matter, right? At the end of the day, because I'm a Buddhist practitioner, at the end of the day, for me, what matters is, my own liberation and my own enlightenment, in some sense, matters to me.
Yes.
How is AI going to give that to me, right? I mean, if you can really utilize AI to do everything, take care of all of your worldly needs, so that you have all the time to go into retreat to betterment yourself, go ahead. I mean, that's a really lovely good balance.
Right.
If you have an AI that can run the business for you, and now you have time for your family, and you have time for your experiences that you want, traveling, and go ahead and do that. I mean, those are really good balances.
Right. Yes.
But then becoming dependent and becoming the source of more work in regards to having it do things for you, because at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, it comes one whole circle back to you. And at the end of the day, this is the whole concept, right? I mean, when computer first came out, everyone was like, oh, we're going to lose our jobs, and computer is going to take over everything, and so on and so forth. And look at now. I mean, computer is I think one major thing that has created the most amount of work.
More jobs,
Exactly. So
yes.
That's what I think, that if we proceed that, then AI, even though the reason is that it's going to lessen our jobs, I think at the end of the day, it's even going to create even more jobs.
Wow, yeah, it does feel like with the speed that technology is advancing, that people, we don't have time to process and to reflect on what's actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, look at handwritten letters. 30, 40 years ago, people would handwrite letters, and maybe the letter will arrive in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks.
If it's like on the other side of the world.
But it was less job.
Yes.
It was less writing.
Yes.
Right? And now, and phone comes up, and we say, okay, messaging is easier now.
No,
but at the end of the day, have you seen the amount of confusion that there is? You text someone, and then they misunderstand it, and then now there's back and forth, and then friendship gone. I mean, you know what I mean, right? So the amount of work that we have to put in because of this advancement has just tripled. So again, another question you can ask yourself, whether it's really an advancement in some ways.
I think that one thing that I really love listening to you talk about is how to be more clear and having clarity in what you're doing and how you're doing it. And yeah, I guess what's coming to me from our conversation right now is around what clarity is AI really giving us about ourselves? I mean, personally, it's not giving me any more clarity about myself.
Exactly. see what this is exactly what I'm saying. If you start asking questions, you actually see, like, you look at yourself and you're like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah. What the hell am I doing?
Right?
That's a good question to ask.
I mean, it comes down to that. It really comes to that. And I mean, I think you put it down quite well. Basically, I think that's it. Right? If you sit down and if you ask and you look at it, you ponder through the thoughts, you're like, huh.
I can write a lot of emails with it, but am I more clear?
Exactly. So I think this is something important to think about, right? When it comes to all of this.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think once you figure that out, then you know where the balance lays.
Yes. So there is a balance at the end of the day.
I would say there is a balance, but the balance comes from really, really, really scratching the surface. You need to be really,
It seems like at the stage that we're at now is almost not tokenistic, but it's very superficial. We haven't really, we're starting to familiarize ourselves with AI, but we haven't really started asking us the questions. I mean, I would just wonder if we're always at this stage of just like, it's another stage of fear of like questioning, because like you said, before it was computers, I think people were scared of, books. And then, so it's always like the latest technology that's kind of freaking people out and creating more fear in people. What are we to do? I guess like, one way of looking at it is like, okay, we have to think of ways that we can relate to technology differently. So in a way that's not dependent, a way that, we can remain in control, but it's really hard sometimes. It's so addictive, and like they really have people imagining ways of keeping people hooked on for longer and longer. So then I guess it comes back to finding the right influencer.
Yes. I mean, it's really interesting, because if you look at cultures,
yeah,
like if I go back and I look at cultures in my own place, they have so many holidays. Like, throughout the year there's holiday. It's monthly after, and even if you look, in the Western calendar, you see Easter, you see Christmas, you see that, you see this. But now it seems like you barely have any time to experience any of the holidays. Whereas in those days, those people would really, really, really enjoy those holidays. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So the time amount that we have spent to, we used to work 3 days, 3 days a week, and now it's 6 days a week. We used to work maybe 5 to 6 hours a day, and now it's like 9 to 10 hours. Some people even work like, up to like 12 to 14 hours. I mean, what are we coming to at?
Yeah, I think that's what's happening, is that we're creating tools to supposedly make us go faster, but then in that time we're just adding more work. It's just, instead of having a rest, people are working more, which is creating burnout and all these other issues.
I think it's all been promoted by competition. This is one thing. The American dream itself is based on competition.
Yeah, I mean, this is largely a Western paradigm.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, what I always say, because I'm from the Buddhist, what do we say, perspective side. What I always say is, when it comes to practice, you can't compete. There's no competition in practice. You cannot.
Yes.
And you can try. You can say, oh, I've done this and I've done that and I've done this much this much that, but that's not going to help your practice at all. Maybe some people will be proud of you, and some people will say, whoa, she has done this and that and this. But at the end of the day, how is that going to help you at all? Right? So deep inside, I mean, there's no results. It's just that simple fact that you get a little bit of dopamine boost when it comes to you being cherished and you being praised by others. But at the end of the day, like I said, if you really look into practice, it's not going to help you at all. Instead of helping, it actually can harm you even more so. Right?
If you compete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead of getting rid of this grasping attitude, you're building more grasping attitude.
Yes.
So I think it's the same with nearly anything. The moment you put it into the form of competition, then, I mean, other than workforce and other than the corporate world where you can excel in regards to money, in regards to fame, in regards to that, other than that, I mean, the conventional side, ultimately, you're not getting anywhere. And I think that's also another question, right? Where am I getting ultimately in regards to being able to apply all of that?
Yes. I think that's really interesting that now we're talking about practice and the shift away from the view of competition, because actually in order to do that, you to let go of any type of goal, but to persevere. That, like, where else can you get that apart from doing practice? Can anyone give you the insight of that by just listening to it as an idea?
What do you think?
No. But it's just until you have some experience of what practice means, what practice is. It's not this like, you know, sort of hippie trippy mystical thing. It's like completely grounding, real, like boredom, you know,
exactly.
and going through that process. Yeah, like I really don't think that any other any technology can substitute that.
No.
Like, show me the technology that makes you bored. That's maybe then we're getting somewhere.
Yes. A really boring game.
Really boring game.
Yeah, but you need to play it.
Yeah, you have to keep playing.
I mean, that's basically life.
Yeah.
Like, can't you see it? That's exactly what's happening. People are stuck in this simulation that's really boring, and people want to get out of it. And basically, you know, it's been grinded on. You have to play the game. You can't get out of it.
Yeah, that's it.
So we're stuck in it.
We're
actually stuck in it.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap up. You know, and maybe I would be really interested to keep talking to you on another topic. Maybe some of the topics that we covered.
Yeah, definitely.
Today.
I think mainly at the end of the day, it comes down to the point where I think it's important to ask questions, and in regards to that, simplifying is one thing, and asking questions based on simplification is one thing. Of course, we did talk about the AI and all of that, and it's in some ways it is there. It's to simplify, but at the end of the day, you know, I think deeper questions that are rooted ultimately is more important, right? Because if you are not asking ultimately rooted questions, then you are not getting anywhere in life. I mean, you know, you go work back, and then, you know, 80 years of your life is gone, and then what? You know, and then you come to the end of your end of your line, and then when you look back, all you see is work and home and work and home and work. And I mean, we need to get out of that, right, in some sense. I mean, of course, it's not easy because of the influence of the corporate world and all of that, but even in regards to what is necessary for us, you know, we need to learn to be content. You know, it's never enough, and that's the scary part. You know, the more you feed, it's never enough. So anyway, I think something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that's fantastic, and I would love to talk to you more about maybe contentment and other aspects connected with
definitely.
with this.
Fantastic.
Thank you.